So why even bother with an action camera gimbal? Let's take a look. Hi, and welcome to this Gadget Talk video. On this channel, we do reviews and how-tos on a variety of cool gadgets, including audio and video tools, action cameras, and radio-related products. If you find this video helpful, please click the thumbs up button below the video and subscribe to the Gadget Talk channel. We've had a bunch of new subscribers over the past several months, and I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. In this video, we'll be taking a look at an inexpensive action camera gimbal from Hohem. It's called the iSteady Pro 3. As you probably guessed, there have been a couple of previous versions of this gimbal. Before we go into a review and some video taken using this gimbal, let's address the question at the lead-in to this video. Do you need a gimbal for your action camera? As with most things, the answer is, it depends. If you have a fairly current GoPro action camera, the answer might be no. GoPro electronic image stabilization is very good, and depending on what and how you shoot, the GoPro's video may be smooth enough to not need a separate gimbal. On the other hand, if your action shots involve a bunch of movements like skateboarding, running, or skiing, a gimbal can take out a bunch of the movements that EIS can't handle. Additionally, if you're like me and use an inexpensive action camera where the EIS is not as good as that in a GoPro, then gimbal usage will be a big improvement. The other reason you may want to use an action camera and gimbal versus a smartphone and a gimbal is cost. Now, I recognize that you already have your smartphone. The cost I'm referring to is the risk-related cost of the phone experiencing a drop or a fall. Smartphone video is very good, but in an active setting, dropping or losing an inexpensive action camera is way less expensive than losing your phone. Now, I use a smartphone for video and have a couple of smartphone gimbals, so I'm not opposed to using them. I simply feel better using my action camera when out hiking or on the lakeshore or other damage-prone location. Additionally, an action cam and action cam gimbal is a smaller, more discreet setup. The smaller form factor is easier to minimize in many situations. Let's take a quick look at some important features and benefits of the iSteady Pro 3. First, the iSteady Pro 3 has both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth capability. If you have a GoPro brand camera, it will allow some limited camera control from the gimbal control panel. If not, the Home smartphone app will allow gimbal control from your smartphone. You'll be able to adjust a bunch of settings such as gimbal speeds, as well as tell the gimbal to pan and tilt, program things like moving time-lapse shots, and so forth. Unlike with the smartphone gimbal apps, you'll need to set your camera's controls and trigger the shutter manually. Functions like software-based object tracking isn't available since the camera and the gimbal aren't communicating. Last, the gimbal has an IPX4 rating, making it splash resistant. Let's take a closer look at what you'll get and a brief description of the controls. Okay, so here's the box for the iSteady Pro 3. You see it's got some water splashing there to indicate it's splash proof. It's got some QR codes here on this side for easy access to the smartphone app, and just your basic marketing materials on the box. So the first thing we have is the iSteady Pro 3 instruction manual, and don't let the size of this fool you. There's only about 10 or 11 pages that apply in each of these many languages that are part of the book. So if you're new to gimbals, you may want to watch some additional YouTube videos about how this thing works, in addition to this one, which will show you many of those things. Now it comes out of the box in a really nice little case. It's got some strength to it and it zips closed. Let's see what we've got inside. First, we've got a little miniature tripod that'll fold out. It screws to the bottom of the gimbal itself. This is our charge cable you're charging with. It has a couple of small cables that it comes with, and these are for connecting near the top of the gimbal using this mini connector. And then it's got one that's got a USB-C here, and another that's got a micro USB here. And those will plug into your camera, which allows you to use the gimbal's large capacity battery to power your camera so that you can maximize the amount of recording you're able to do. So now let's take a look at the gimbal itself. I'm going to mount a camera to it so I can turn it on. You're not supposed to run the gimbal without a camera attached. So let's do that. Okay, so here's the gimbal. I've got it turned on, and so we'll do just a quick tour. So here we've got battery indicator lights, and so they will glow from 1 to 4 of the charge cycles. On this side, we've got a 1/4-20 screw, which will allow us to attach a mount or a expansion bar of some kind if we wanted to mount an external microphone. Behind this little rubber grommet here, rubber door, we've got the USB-A side for charging, and then we've got a USB-C side for using the battery to charge something else. Because it's splash proof, these little things are covered with these little rubber doors, so gives it some protection against water. On the front of the gimbal, we've got the trigger. Double tap on the trigger will recenter the gimbal, so that's pretty handy. On the top, you see I've got a camera mounted, and so we've got this bar that goes across it, and then from side to side there's almost an inch of adjustment room there. So it'll take a variety of sizes of cameras, but you do need to watch the size of your camera so it'll fit within the cradle here. There's some adjustability to move this little bar left or right so that you don't conflict with any of the controls that might be on the camera. On the bottom, we have yet another 1/4-20, which would allow us to screw in that little tripod that comes with the kit, or mount it to a monopod or a full-size tripod if that was how you needed to use the device for your particular project. Now let's just take a minute and look at the control panel. We've got a joystick on this, and so the joystick is going to go left and right. Will cause it to move in, as shown here. Up and down will give it some tilt control. And then this will handle the roll. So a push up will cause it to roll one direction, and a push down will cause it to roll the other. And again, as I said, when you double tap the trigger, it'll center. This is the mode button right here. The mode button allows you to change between the 4 modes. We've got a very faint LED right here, and it's probably one of the drawbacks to this particular gimbal. It's hard to see in the daylight. So we've got pan follow, we've got pan and tilt follow, we've got all lock, and we've got point of view. And I'll explain those here in just a few minutes. And then over here, there's another little LED that when you have the smartphone app connected to the gimbal, it will glow blue, showing that the Bluetooth is connected. So that's pretty much it. Just one other thing I wanted to point out to you. And right down here, there's another little rubber door that opens up to allow one of those short cables I just showed you to go from the power from the gimbal's battery to the power in the camera. In this case, I've got it on this side of the camera. And then there is also right here an on-off switch that you can turn on the gimbal's Wi-Fi. If you are using a GoPro camera, you can pair it to your GoPro, and it will allow you to do some basic camera controls from the gimbal's control panel. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple, nothing too out of the ordinary for the gimbal itself. So let's go outside and take a look at the gimbal in action and review some video taken from a Campark V30 Action camera mounted to the gimbal. Okay, and so this video clip, we really want to just take a look at what the gimbal's doing. So I'm recording onto a different camera here, and we're just going to work through the modes here just very quickly. And we'll go to a little bit more scenic spot to look at the recorded video from the various modes here in just a second. So in this case, we're in the pan follow mode. That is the mode that comes up when the gimbal turns on. And so let's take a look at what's happening. It's going to lock in the horizontal. So when we move, it stays locked in the horizontal. And then you see that the pan follows a little bit, which means that it allows the camera to come to a gentle stop as it gets to the end of the panning. Now in this mode, we're in the PTF, or pan and tilt follow. That means it's going to follow going up and it's going to follow going sideways. So those gimbals are going to be open. So let's see what happens there. So it's very similar in the pan direction, but you also see that in tilt, it follows as well to allow you to move the gimbal slowly, but while the tilt part follows along behind, allowing for that smooth shot. So that's the pan and tilt follow. Now, the next mode is the all lock, or the L mode. So let me transition into that. So in this mode, the gimbal is going to keep the camera pointed at the same place. So in this case, I'm pointed at the camera that's recording. So as I lower, the camera stays at that. As I raise, the camera stays at that. Same thing when I go from side to side. And if I do some smooth motions, it tilts in all of those ways. So that is the lock mode, all right? And so the fourth mode here is the point of view, and that you'd use to kind of simulate what you would see if you were taking the character's point of view as you walked along, turned corners, and that kind of thing. And so as you can see, we turn, it goes where I turn. It tilts a little bit as if I were making a turn like this with my basic just eyes. When I go down, it's going to go down in kind of a follow. And when I go up, it's going to go up inside of a follow. But then it has that little bit of a tilt to it. So that is the point of view. Now I'm in the lock mode, and then I can, within this orientation, I can also make use of that 600 degrees worth of turn. So let me turn this around, and you can see that I can get an interesting camera effect by turning the camera, and it goes more than one complete revolution. And here's where we'd set up that twisting transition mode. So we've got the camera facing forward. I've got the rotation going, so I'll put it at one end using the joystick. Then I'm going to change the angle of the camera here, again with the joystick, to get it straight ahead. Then if I started recording, I can get that mode where I can get a circular pattern off the one gimbal and get a twisting transition for a little artistic effect. So those are the primary functions of the camera. We'll take a look at the recorded video of these modes in a little more visually interesting place. Here are some videos using the various modes. So here are some outdoor clips taken with my Campark V30, small, inexpensive action cam. It's kind of the golden hour early on a Saturday morning. The first clip we're going to look at is taken in my car, so let's jump to that. I had the radio on, so the volume is down to avoid any copyright problems. So here we're in the pan follow mode, just walking through a path in my park. You can see that when I stop and turn, the video comes to a smooth stop. And this would be the mode you would use most of the time. I'm not doing any kind of a ninja walk, I'm just walking down the sidewalk. Now here I'm going to make that same walk in the pan and tilt follow mode. This is the mode where you'll have the ability to have stability across the horizon, but the camera will also follow you in the tilt mode, or the up and down movement of the camera. So let's look at this. Smooth movements, both pan and tilt. Okay, so here I am in the lock mode, which means basically all of the gimbals are unlocked. I'm pointed at some playground equipment, and I'm just going to kind of move the gimbal in about a 2 to 2.5 foot diameter circle here. You can see that the camera points at the playground equipment throughout the circle. So it's pointed where the gyro sensed it was as it goes around. You may hear my voice ebbing and flowing a little bit as I reached up in the air at the high point of those circles. So that's the lock mode. Now this is the point of view mode, and this is the one where you would set it to as if the camera was the eyes of the character that you were trying to represent in your film story, as one possible way. So I'm going to approach this, and I'm going to turn to look inside. As if I were looking for something that I might have dropped, or someone hiding in the swing set. Okay, so in this shot I'm going to hold the gimbal kind of above my head and then pivot the camera to get a full 360 degree pan, and actually it'll be that 600 degrees that the gimbal is capable of. So let's try that. And so now I'm in the point of view mode. I'm going to try that inception effect, just going after the big display here on the side of this playground equipment as I walk toward it and rotate. So here we have the HOEM iSteady Pro 3 app going. And as you can see, it has some ability to control, calibrate, settings, and then more at the bottom. You also see that it's a Bluetooth related app. So to get connected, I tap the Bluetooth icon at the top right, and it connected to my iSteady Pro 3, and the little Bluetooth icon lit on the control panels. So I've got a communication link established with my gimbal. So let's start with the control. We go into the control, and here you have a virtual joystick. And so by sliding the button in the center to the right and to the left or up and down, what you basically have there is the gimbal moving that same thing. So if you had your gimbal on a tripod or extended up on a some kind of extension pole or selfie stick, you could still control what it was the gimbal was pointing the camera at, although because this isn't connected to the camera, you're not going to see what you're recording. So that's one of the drawbacks of an action camera gimbal. You're controlling the gimbal, but you're not controlling the camera. So let me recenter. So if I wanted to do a motion time lapse, I'd have to set those parameters and start the camera as well as setting the gimbal parameters. And so here you can see that what we're going to do is just simply move the camera to the pan and tilt that we want, and then add a waypoint. And then we're going to move the camera over. We're going to move the camera over to the next position that we want, add a waypoint. And then we're going to move the camera over to another position. We'll raise and we'll twist and lower the camera and then press again. And then when we have at least 2, and in this case I've got 3 waypoints, I press next. And so when you press next, then you're going to have to select the amount of time. So you can see that you have 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you're going to have to do the arithmetic to get the number of shots and the amount of time to produce the time-lapse shot that you want. And then simply type begin, and the camera will move to position number 1 and then begin the motion that we selected with those 3 stops. So the gimbal right now is moving smoothly and slowly, pointing the camera where I had selected the shots. Again, remember to press the shutter on your camera to start the process in the camera, as well as starting the process in the gimbal. So with the time lapse done, let's go back and look at some of the other things we have. We can do a calibration. I'm not going to do that. I'm happy with the calibration of my device, but you can run that calibration here through the apps, and then you can get a bunch of settings. And so you can see you can select the follow speeds for the various controls. You can provide some input as to the amount of movement you're going to get with the joystick speed, and so forth. You can tilt reverse the joystick, pan reverse, and so forth. If we go to motor options, we can get kind of the motor torsion amounts there. And so there's a fair amount of controls that you can make adjustments to here in the gimbal itself. And then when we move to more, you're just going to get some information about HOEM, the firmware version, and so forth. So that's the quick and dirty for the HOEM iSteady Pro 3 app. So what's my opinion of the iSteady Pro 3? All in all, it's a good value for a sub $100 action cam gimbal. The controls are easy to use, and the stabilization makes a big difference. I like that you can power your camera from the large gimbal battery, giving you plenty of recording time without having to change batteries on the camera. The controls are easy to use, and the feature set is very good. Updates and adjustments through the app are also a big plus. I've tried this gimbal with several inexpensive action cameras, and they all fit. The GoPro 9 is a bit bigger and is labeled as not compatible. Make sure that you measure your camera and match it to the maximum dimensions listed for the gimbal. Double check camera control locations too, to make sure that the gimbal won't cover or activate any camera controls. On the downside, the small LEDs that indicate what mode the gimbal is in are nearly impossible to read on a bright day. I find myself turning the gimbal off and then on to reset the gimbal to the PF mode, and then counting button presses to get to the different gimbal modes. Also on the downside is, despite having a very thick instruction booklet, the thickness comes from all the languages it covers. The instructions themselves span only 12 small pages with little explanation of gimbal modes and operation. If this is your first gimbal, you won't find it much help. Fortunately, there are lots of videos like this one to guide you through basic operations and some fancy gimbal moves if you're new to gimbals. So, back to the initial question, do you need an action camera gimbal? For me, the answer is yes, if your action camera is one of the many inexpensive action cameras on the market. Shaky or jumpy video can be quite distracting, causing your viewer to abandon your video. A small investment in a gimbal like the Hohem iSteady Pro 3 could easily be the reason your viewer stays till the end of your video and looks forward to viewing your other content. Again, if you found this video helpful, please click the thumbs up button below the video and subscribe to the Gadget Talk channel. Click the bell icon to be notified when I post new videos. Thanks for watching.